Everyone, let's welcome Jason Charles Miller to Dragon Talk.
Oh, yay! Finally!
That's what this is. Okay. I thought we were getting a Zoom call together to just play D&D, but I can talk about it.
We can do that too.
We stealthed into this D&D session.
We teleported you right here.
Tricked me. All right.
A little.
Nice. So you are a musician, a voiceover actor, in addition to being a Dungeons and Dragons aficionado for a long time, right?
Yes. Enthusiast, dungeon master, stuff like that.
Nice. And I think I started working with you with Satine Phoenix and that whole crew for Sirens of the Realms and all that, right? And so you've been to many D&D lives.
Yes, I kept being a frequent guest star on Sirens, so much so that by season 3, I just became a cast member. I started out as the Sirens roadie and then just sort of ended up being in the band. The one guy in the all-girl band.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's a good story right there. Like a good campaign. Yeah.
You performed the music interludes during 2018's Stream of Many Eyes. That I loved everything you put together for that. You almost arranged all that too, right?
Yeah. Thanks. That was really fun. That was a lot of songs from our show, because we would try to write a lot of songs for the bard. So the concept of Sirens of the Realms is an all-girl bard band traveling around Faerun. And so, we would write different songs based on what happened, or what we needed to, for the adventure. So then we found ourselves with quite a few songs to be able to perform.
And it worked out really awesome.
Yeah. I have played D&D with you, and I hope you don't remember.
You hope you don't remember?
Yeah,
Was it that bad of an experience?
Well, for me, it was at Gary Con. And I think
that was fun. That was a fun game.
But I think that was also the game when so it was like a bunch of really talented musicians and me. And I'm not a musician, and I have come to just accept this about myself. I can't sing. I have no musical ability, and I think it was also the game that I may have had my face painted like a cat.
Oh yeah,
because I was playing it. I was playing a Tabaxi.
Hey, if you're playing a Tabaxi, you've got to put on the list.
So 5 minutes before the game, I saw the face painter, and I was like, oh, can you make me look like a cool kitty, like a cool cat? I just thought maybe add some cat eye or something to me. And oh no, when I was done, I had the full 5-year-old girl at the zoo cat face. And there was no time to change. And I'm like, okay, so I'll just play this kitty face Tabaxi around all of these musicians, and you guys kept dropping into song in the middle of the game that you were just I'm just gonna start singing, and it was amazing. And I was sitting across the table from you, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I don't even know why am I here? Why is my face painted? And
I don't know. You look like you're having a really good time. So.
I was having it's hard not to have a great time when an incredibly talented musician just bursts into song in your D&D game, right in front of you. But I couldn't help but feel a little bit I have nothing to offer.
All right, well, you were
amazing bards.
Well, you were hiding it really well.
Hiding behind my cat makeup.
It's funny because one of the games that I frequently work on as a voiceover artist is Neverwinter. And, I was lucky enough to be the voice of Driss. But, there's always new expansions coming out. And in one of the expansions, I actually played a Tabaxi minstrel.
Cool.
And there were these lines in the script that just says hums a little tune or sings a little thing. And I went to the producers and I was like, you guys want me to just I'll come up with something tonight and I'll just send it to you tomorrow. Do you want me to write little little 5-second or 10-second little songs that he might sing. And they were like, sure. So I did that. And so my singing is actually in the game too, which is fun. As a tabaxi. Yeah.
As a tabaxi. Okay. So you can like put out an album like music for tabaxis.
I could.
It would maybe like inspire the rest of us cat people. I kind of want to ask. I want to ask about how you got into D&D, but also like you're very prolific. I mean, like I think that the songs that you were singing during that game at GaryCon, you had also just like wrote. Like I remember Chris Lindsay telling me like he just like wrote the song, and because Chris was singing along with you for parts of it.
We wrote a song the night before, just like in our hotel room.
As it happens,
it was a D&D themed song called "Hey Dungeon Lady."
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I
think we
beautiful
performed
song.
in 2019. Greg, we performed that at
The Descent.
The Descent. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. So,
but the night you were there, that was its premiere night. I
got to hear it. I got to hear it first.
As did everyone who was paying attention on the live stream.
I was there.
You were in the room with the lighter up in the air,
yes.
or the wand of produce flame up in the air.
Yep. It was very cool.
How did you get started playing Dungeons and Dragons? What was your origin story for getting into play like this?
Two places. So I grew up in Clifton, Virginia, which is close enough to DC to where my dad worked in DC, but far enough away from DC where I had friends that never even set foot in there. So it was like a 40-minute drive to DC, but it was definitely rural Virginia. So no sidewalks, kind of in the middle of the woods. The only, luckily though, like 2 houses away, there was a friend who played D&D. And then my cousins who lived in Connecticut at the time, over like a holiday break, they also played D&D. And this was I was about age 8 or 9 at this point. And my friend John Franklin and I would always play D&D on the bus, just sort of like one-on-one adventures. But the very first time I played was actually with my cousin Wesley, and I had this great time creating my character, and then he had a great creating and equipping my character, and then he had a great time 5 minutes into the game, immediately like stripping everything, all of my equipment, everything, just like teaching me the hard knocks of the game and how quickly things can go bad. So I was like immediately robbed and bullied by brigands. And within 5 minutes of playing my very first game, my character was naked in the middle of the street.
And you were like, yes, this game
No,
is
I was
awesome.
like, this game sucks. But I could see the potential. It taught me what not to do early on.
Nice.
Okay, so there was a lesson, but tough love, but there was a lesson.
Don't show your sword to a random NPC. He'll take it. Don't tell another random NPC how many gold pieces you have. He'll take that too.
Wait, is that what you did in the first 5 minutes? You're like, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I have this cool sword.
Like he basically put me up against a bunch of bullies. So I'm in the middle of this town, and the very first NPC I meet is like, hey, come here. Let me see that sword. I'm like, oh, here you go. And then like he runs off with it. And then the next one was like, hey, come here. How many gold pieces do you have? Give it to me.
Let me count them out for you. Okay.
That was how Cousin Wesley kicked my ass.
Cousin Wesley. I'm going to guess that was like, in the 80s era of D&D play.
Yes. It was, I can't remember what rule book he had, but the first package that I bought was the 1980 basic D&D. Red box, Moldvay, I think, was the main designer as I go back and look at it. And, very simple. Like you could only, alignments were lawful, neutral, or chaotic. Things like that. Your race and your class were the same thing. So like if you're an elf, you're just an elf. If you're a halfling, you're just a halfling. And then like human, like if you're a fighter or a cleric or a magic user, you were human. It was interesting. I mean, it definitely was a good way to learn the game, though, because it sort of limited your choices.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think for me, I was able to sort of learn what each class did quicker, and then have that sort of as a good basis, rather than when people play now. And I remember I had a friend recently that was like, I just made my first character. I'm like, oh, cool. What is it? He's like, he's a tiefling warlock. And I'm like, wow, like that is crazy that's your first character ever. Like that was just inconceivable to me back in the day. So, when I invite new people to play the game and I bring them into the game for the first time, I like to keep it simple, like how Basic did it, so that there's not as much for the player to be confused about.
Yes, I agree. It's something that I think a lot about, is how overwhelming it can be for new players, even if there is people there to help them. Right. You kind of have to keep reinforcing that. Don't worry about the rules. You don't have to know the rules. You don't have to know anything. I'll tell you what to do the whole time. But yeah, like there is a lot of choice that goes into even just creating a very basic character. So
right.
I think we can learn a lot from the D&D of the past and Cousin Wesley.
Yeah, thanks, cousin. I've been playing a kind of a homebrew campaign that has a little bit more of a smaller scope in races, right? I just want to kind of start with the dwarf and gnome and human and elf, and kind of like get those like as a really good baseline, and then maybe we can introduce more ones later on. But it is odd that you're totally right that there's just people who be like, oh, I'm doing a grung ranger as my first character, and you're like, whoa, I mean that feels like next level. But at the same time, I really like that people can just be like, what is your fantasy, or like what is the story that is the most exciting to you, and having those restrictions off. I think can do wonders for the idea of gatekeeping, right? Like you can kind of create whatever you want, and it's okay. You don't necessarily have to play one specific way.
Yeah, no, I'm not against it. I just, when I want to teach people the game, I like to teach them the way I taught it, or the way I learned it, rather, the way I learned it in a way. So I like to limit their choices at first, and then let them see the huge expansion that can happen.
For sure. And you also became a professional musician, doing many different bands and things over the and we'll get to your tour with Dragons in a second. But talk a little bit about what it's like to be a budding musician, and how that kind of did that grow at the same time as your fandom in with D&D or what?
I think so. I mean, so my band for many years was called Godhead, and actually I took the name from the back of an issue of Fantasy Gamer magazine that always had it was sort of like a competitor to Dragon magazine, and it always had an adventure in the back of it. And there was this adventure that came in the only issue I ever bought of Fantasy Gamer magazine was your quest. It was like super high level adventure, and your quest was to become Solomar, god of the sun. Like whoever grabbed the godhead at the end of the adventure, then that character became the new god of the sun or something. And there was even a false godhead hidden in front of the real godhead. And I was like, Godhead, that's an awesome name for a band. So I always sort of put that away in my Rolodex, and then when it was time, I pulled that out, and the band members loved it. So the very name of the band that started my career and gave me a career, that name was from a D&D module.
I love that. Was anyone else in the band a D&D player at the time?
No, they weren't. And good luck getting them into it back then. You know what I mean? It's the things have changed so much, even in the last 5 to 10 years, about D&D. You used to speak about it in hushed tones, in darkened rooms. And now it's totally different, which I love, because then there's so many more people that you didn't know played D&D that are admitting, yeah, I always played it, and it's great to see that.
And you've been seeing that kind of, in the Los Angeles universe. I think it's expanded even more. People in the entertainment business who have embraced the dorkiness of Dungeons and Dragons even more so.
Big time. I mean, there's now more than ever, like, more popular culture. D&D is being infused into that, whether it's a like in a story arc on a few television shows or full television shows that are being made now. And it's funny because I knew Matt Mercer from the voice acting world, and then we knew each other again from doing Satine's D&D charity events.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he told me about Critical Role early on, and I had already worked with Felicia Day on music for the Guild, her show. So when he was launching Critical Role, I said, "Hey, do you need a theme song?" And he was like, "Sure." So the theme song that I did for them was just kind of on a whim. And then, I don't know how many hundreds of episodes later and many different iterations of the theme song, that became kind of an iconic thing for me. And that all happened because I was at a party at a journalist's house, a rock journalist named Neil Strauss, and a guy that worked for him was introduced to me by Neil, and Neil said, "Hey, you two should talk. George plays Dungeons and Dragons too." And so our friendship happened that way. He introduced me to Satine, and then, like, the rest is history. So kind of crazy.
Parties. It is. So, like, let's go back to the theme song. Theme songs can, they're obviously very iconic when it comes to the shows that they're representing. But how do you write a theme song for, like, how far along was Critical Role when had it started, or?
No, it was just a concept.
So what did you know about, like, the show in order to, like, capture the essence of what the theme song should be?
I didn't know much. I just knew it was them sitting around a table playing D&D. And so I had this melody in my head for a while that I'm a huge fan of, of, like, historical fiction and, like, and fantasy. So, Howard Shore is a huge inspiration for me. The composer that did the Lord of the Rings score. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to jump into this and see what comes out. And that's what did.
It's meant to be.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be.
So you mentioned voice acting too. Like, how did that portion of your career, since your career is multifaceted, how did that start?
Well, I was always a huge fan. I was also a huge fan of anime growing up. And so I always thought it would be great to voice something in an anime one day. Fast forward to 2002, where in between tours, Godhead would sometimes write music for commercials, and we were writing the music for a Pop-Tarts commercial, and it needed just a voice on top to just sing a couple of lines. But that got me into the Screen Actors Guild because it was a national commercial. So then I was like, you know what, I should really give voice acting a try now. I have this opportunity. And so I took some classes, and I actually met Taliesin Jaffe in 2003 at the Anime Expo. And he gave me my first voice acting job in the Hellsing anime. And then I just learned the craft, got an agent, and just started auditioning for things all the time. And, now I've been in, like, hundreds of things.
I feel like you're, like, a master of manifesting things. Like, you're just like, I should do this one day. I'm going to tuck that away and wait for it. And then, like, the thing that comes to you, like, I had this melody in my head, and now it's the theme for Critical Role.
It's always better when you have that in the bank, so to speak, your storage banks, rather than if you're trying to write something for something, musically anyway. So often my publisher will say, hey, do you have anything that sounds like this? Or do you have anything that would fit in this? And if I do, then often it gets licensed in a television show or a movie or something like that. When you try to write something specifically for a project, unless you have the job, that's one thing, because then you have the freedom to relax and be able to get it right. But often writing a piece of music and trying to pitch it specifically for a job doesn't always work because it feels creatively forced. So I'm always writing new things just in case they could be used for something in the future.
Oh, that's really interesting.
I know, man. So do you have like a bank of melodies and half-formed song
I mean,
fragments
I've got
that you can put together?
folders of songs and songs and songs. Sometimes, I mean, like for my last album as a solo artist, I think I wrote like 45 songs for it. Whoa. And the album has 11 songs. So, there's a lot of other songs that are great that just didn't necessarily fit the theme of that album. So I may release those later or put it on the next album or something like that. So
I mean, you always hear of B-sides or things that were cut off of the albums for things, but I always wondered, like, is it that way where you just created so many songs that you cut down and got the best ones, or what? Yeah, like what's the criteria?
That's often, I think, for a lot of acts, that's what they do, and they might even record. Most people will over record, like they'll write 30 to 40 songs for an album, and they might record 16 to 20 of them and then whittle that down to 10 or 12.
Do you find when you're writing, or like, is there like a theme that you're like, oh, like this kind of, like there's like a connective tissue that keeps popping up in the work that you're working on, or is it just kind of like everywhere?
Yeah, it depends on my mood, and often I'll let things inspire me when I'm just walking through life or doing things during the day. I might hear something and then, record it. Before the days of smartphones, you would have a little mini recorder in your bag. Now it's super easy. You just pull up the phone and sing the melody into it. I actually did it last night. I was walking the dog super late and I was like, oh, yeah. So I pulled out my phone, sang the little melody into it so I didn't forget, and off I went. And that'll probably become a song at some point.
I love hearing about people's creative process and how inspiration finds them. So that's why I ask a lot of questions about, and then what happens?
Right.
So it gets into your smartphone.
What's the name of that song? And how can we find it? Like track it from,
Oh, I know. That's another problem too, because you can't call everything cool idea, right?
Cool idea 179.
Like, so I try to describe it a little bit, like spooky bluesy riff or whatever. But, that's really funny that, I don't know how many on the phone here that are just, I think the default, it just tells you like what address you are at or what address you were near,
Yeah.
And then sometimes it'll have, you can't really see it, but yeah, there's just, I scroll forever. So
that's funny. I wonder if that's how the song Mambo No. 5 was named.
That's what I was trying to remember. Like, I know there's something similar with, like,
right? Like that was just somebody's idea. This was the Mambo No. 5 idea.
And then number 5 was the best of the bunch. There was
really
like 113 of them, but really just number 5 was the one that stuck.
So yeah, you mentioned your last solo album, and then you toured in support of that back when you could tour.
Back when you could tour.
And you pitched this awesome idea, which was in between going to different cities, you would go and try and visit game stores in the area and record that. And we ended up putting it on the D&D YouTube channel with On Tour with Dragons.
Right. Yeah. I remember, you and I actually were having a conversation about it, the idea. And I was like, look, I'm going to be in, I'm going on tour and I'm going to be in all these different cities across the country. And even if I'm there, even if I'm playing that evening, you usually arrive in the city in the morning and you have some downtime, right? And I often try to go to local gaming stores if I'm in another city just to see what they're like.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, why not feature as many of these stores as we can to show, like the hometown game store is kind of like the last piece of individual, I'm trying to think of the name, but so yeah, so it's maybe we'll cut there. But I'm like,
Spoken like a true voice actor. You're like, we'll cut this and then get it back later.
Yeah. We'll fix it in post, right? I'm stammering. But
it's the last independent business. Is that what you're trying to say?
Right. Yes. So the hometown game store is like the last piece of independent business for local communities.
Yeah.
And I thought, how cool would it be to feature as many of these as we could? And I had a blast doing it. And I know we were about to release it, and then the pandemic hit. So then I went back and sort of cut new intros to be like, hey, the story you're about to see, obviously you can't visit it right now, but they're doing curbside pickup, they're doing local delivery, you can order from here or there, because we still, independent businesses are taking a massive hit right now. And so I just wanted to add that in there to just make sure that people were aware of these places. Because also, as a traveling musician, a lot of the venues that I have played over the years, some of them are not going to survive with this.
Yeah.
And it's terrible, but so I at least wanted to do what we could to try to make some of these places have a fighting chance.
Yeah, it was a great pivot, I think, because you're right. Like there's so much small businesses that are not getting that foot traffic anymore. And I think a lot of us who used to love to go to those stores was missing the idea of just browsing and being able to go through and look at all of the fun gaming materials that are out there too. And so when we did re-release that in April and May this spring, it did two things. One was it highlighted, as you were saying, which was like how you can go to these stores still and get D&D books through them. And the other thing was that it gave people watching like a little tour of a game store that they weren't able to do anymore, right? So you got that little dopamine lift from the audience as well.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And who knows? Maybe we'll do more of those in the future when this all happens, and you can go.
When I'm back on the road, yeah.
What were some fun anecdotes that you might be able to tell from some of those that to get people interested in watch them? I know mine, but I want to see if you have any first.
Well, definitely. Well, it's funny because the Chicago episode I think is my favorite for two reasons. One, because at that particular store, Fair Game, they have an amazing kids group that plays D&D. I think there's like they had an after school program where kids would come there and play D&D. And I thought that how cool that was. And they sort of built the adventure together with the DM, and they're still doing that online right now, which is great.
Oh, that's cool.
And then
nice.
That was also the same episode where I was basically able to reenact the scene in Spinal Tap where they could never find the stage, because in the venue that we played that night, the basement was so expansive that you really could get lost down there. And I had played there once before, and I said, I've got to film down here because this just lends itself to that. I mean, there's so many twists and turns, and you just can't find stage.
I cracked up watching that. I think you had turned that in. It was like episode 2 or 3 of what you turned in, and I was watching it, and I was like, you played it so straight that I was like, was this on purpose or not? I couldn't tell. Or if it was like after the fact where you were like, oh, this is kind of like this, so let's just add it in anyway. It was really good performance by you and your band by just being like, oh, all right, I guess we'll follow this way.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not actors at all, so it was a stretch for them, but they did well.
Yeah, and it just keeps going. It's like a 3-minute sequence of you guys trying to find the stage. You're like, oh, no, wait, we found it. Oh, wait, no, this is the boiler room.
Yeah, and we even open the stage door, and it's like a dead end,
It says stage door on it.
Yeah. And it really is a dead end?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great.
It's like
so
it's like a darkened little room. Like, this is not the way to the stage.
It always feels like an evil roadie put that there
Yep.
to lure people in.
Right. Yeah. To capture them.
That's amazing.
There's another store though that I was thinking of too, in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, that is 7,000 square feet of game.
Whoa.
It was incredible. I walked in and I was like, this is as big as a department store, and it is there's just hundreds of people playing. It's called Firefly Toys and Games. They have a whole arcade on one side, but they have private rooms to play D&D in, and then they just have hundreds of people playing at scores of tables. I was super, super impressed and happy to see that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's what I love too about this series is that you really get to see like a slice of the community too, like, and like everybody can enjoy a game store. And I just, I love seeing like mothers with their children, playing games, or, young people, older people, everybody. It's just, and it was just nice to see like everybody come together in person in one spot and enjoy
when you
a
can't
game
anymore.
Yes. Yeah. Are people ever surprised to find out that you play Dungeons and Dragons?
Sometimes. I think some people that I know in the music business that only know me as a musician are a little surprised when it comes up, but then there'll always be somebody in the bunch that also plays, so then that brings us together even tighter. But yeah, I mean, people know me for different things. So some people only know me as a voice actor that I work with. Some people only know me as a musician. Some people online, only know me from like all the stuff that I've done on Geek and Sundry. There's a show that we did called Starter Kit, where in season 1 we taught people how to play D&D, and that first episode has millions of views. And I remember, people, I've been recognized on the street for that, and they have no idea. Like, they just think that that's who I am, is I'm that DM there in that little world for them, not knowing any of the other things that I do. So it's always fun when worlds connect. I love that more than anything, but I don't broadcast everything that I do to everyone, because then I would feel like I'm, trying to sell myself too much or whatever. So I just kind of let people discover those things about me. I love it when that happens naturally. Like recently, I acted in Final Fantasy 14, and then a couple of years later was offered to sing the theme song to the next expansion. And that was really neat for them to know me as an actor first, and then realize that I could also sing and be involved in the game in another way.
That's cool.
That is awesome.
You're connected with the Wasteland franchise too, right?
Yeah. Oh, Wasteland Weekend?
No, I was thinking the Wasteland video game from In Exile.
Oh, no, not connected with them.
Oh, okay. Well, then, yeah, Wasteland Weekend was what I was thinking of then.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Wasteland Weekend, people call that like angry. Some people jokingly call it Angry Burning Man, but it's basically 5,000 of us dress up like we're in a Mad Max movie and hang out for a weekend. And my band will often play. So
I remember seeing all the pictures from the sets and stuff from there, as well as the costumes, the vehicles, and then that inspired me to contact some of those folks and bring their vehicles to the Descent as kind of real life representations of the Hellfire machines that would be down there.
Yeah, they were perfect for that.
I love it. Yeah, it was a nice way to be like, they're not definitely one-to-one of what our concept art looked like by any means, but it got the idea across.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. Are you finding any ways, given, the pandemic and all the other things happening in this year, to, find new ways to channel your creativity or stay connected with people, or, kind of utilize the whole virtual presence to your advantage? Because, most people
as
can
much
get
as
online.
I can. Yeah, as much as I can. I'm really fortunate in the fact that I was helping develop a video game for the last 2 years that got greenlit in January. And
Oh,
it's
nice.
a giant project, and I'm writing a ton of music for it. And I mean, that's pretty much all I'm allowed to say, but it's keeping me busy up into next year. So I'm like, oh, thank God I've got this, because,
Right.
so many other things are happening. But I have a weekly game, um, a weekly D&D game that's not streaming, just with friends that I play. I jump on a lot of different streams a lot. What I started through the years, I'd done a show on YouTube called Miller's Music Mondays, where every Monday I would release a new song.
Oh my
Now
gosh.
I'm doing that live on my Twitch channel. So, and I have guests. So I call it Miller's Music Mondays Live. And it's every Monday at 7 Pacific. And every episode I have a new guest. So I run it like a songwriter round. And the way songwriter rounds go is you might go to see 3 songwriters, and then person number 1 plays a song, then person number 2 plays a song, then person number 3 plays a song, then it's back to number 1. And that's the show. So that's how I do it when I have guests, where we all take turns playing songs, going back and forth, telling each other, what we're up to, if we have new releases that are happening. And it's really fun because the audience participates too and asks questions. And that has definitely helped my sort of craving to perform, because, I had 2 different European tours scheduled this year. I had a US tour scheduled. I was on a bunch of great festivals that all get canceled or postponed. So as a performer, I want to perform. So luckily that's been really good and really fun. And every week more people watch, and it's helpful for me and fulfills that little thing inside of me, that calling. As performers, like we don't do it for the money. We do it because we're called to do it from some inner thing. I mean, I've been performing in front of audiences since I was 5. Because it's just something that always inspired me. So luckily being able to do it on Twitch has at least alleviated that, and to see the immediate response from the crowd. You don't see their faces, but at least you see what they're saying. And that's really nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's a nice thing. Sorry, Greg, what?
I was just gonna say, I have an actor friend of mine who is going through some of the similar things of like just not being able to perform in front of groups. But he recently did, I think it was like a company retreat. So it was like a Zoom call like this, but the way he described it was like, well, I got to make strangers laugh today. So that little, thing I needed in my psyche was satisfied, at least for today. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, there's something to that. Just performing for strangers is sometimes the only way you get it.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. And there is like some advantage, like silver lining to most people being online now and used to doing things virtually, but like you're also providing a really nice outlet for the people who are on your show. You're cultivating that community and giving people that connection that everybody really needs right now.
Yeah. Didn't you just have Amy Vorpal on recently?
Yeah, Amy Vorpal was my guest, and I think this will air after, but like Hal Sparks is my guest next week. So,
oh sweet,
and I've got a lot of really fun guests coming up, and so it's like some of my friends from the nerd community, like Laser from the Double Clicks was a guest previously, and then other guests that I know from the music business that may or may not even know about Twitch. And then once they come on the show, they're like, oh my God, I can do this, so
yeah,
it's a cool thing to bring people that are really familiar with the space, and then ones that are sort of being introduced to it.
Very cool. All right. So since you're musically talented, you're basically a real life bard, being able to bring that type of songs and musicality to many of the characters that you play. For those of us like Shelley and me who are not so musically inclined, but love bards. At least I do. I love playing that type of performer. What kind of advice or what things that could you tell players out there that could that only a musician would know that might be able to spicing up playing a bard or something like that?
Well, the advice I would give someone who might not be musically inclined, but who still wants to play a bard is um, just have fun with it. Like, you don't have to sing at the table if you don't want to. I mean, there are performance checks for that. I think that like it's fun to maybe write down a few lines ahead of time on maybe something that you think is going to happen in the game, but don't be afraid to just play the game and describe what your character is doing. You don't necessarily have to perform it for your friends. In fact, a lot of times performing for our friends is way more intimidating than performing for strangers. So if you're worried about playing a bard simply because you're afraid to perform, throw that out the window and just describe to us what's happening. And I think that you'll be a lot more comfortable doing that. And, maybe one day build up to writing a song or something, but it is not required whatsoever in the game.
And couldn't you just play like an unconventional bard? Maybe you're a bard who does cover tunes, or maybe you just do spoken word, or you just, you can
or you're a stand-up comedian bard.
Yeah. Or you read Shakespeare. Like, it doesn't, like, you can, there seems to be a lot of freedom with that particular character. Right.
But that little piece of, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say that I didn't even think about it, but that little piece of advice, like, you can just describe it. I actually did that about a year ago when I was in a Avernus campaign, and I wanted to play a bard who was like a, David Bowie, David Lee Roth kind of mashup, glam rock.
That's a pretty cool mashup.
Yeah. He was, the tights and everything, and he had dueling.
Did he do the kick?
Yeah, he totally did the kick. As well as the androgynous kind of look, lots of fire and orange and red kind of themes in his costume. But I rolled a really high performance check kind of on the last night that they were in Baldur's Gate before they got sucked down into hell. But I just described it. I didn't know any other things, so I just I did maybe one line. I think I did a line from Devil Inside by NXS just to get it in the mood. But then I it was basically like describing what a rock concert was like in a D&D setting, and the DM kind of picked it up and described what was happening, what's going on, and all of the players at the table are all kind of like, yeah, we're rocking, right now. And there was very little actual performance by me, but first we all got that image and feeling in our hearts and minds as we were playing, and it worked wonderfully.
Great. Speaking of bards, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the other thing that I do every week right now is for the game Idle Champions, which is a D&D licensor. I actually do a weekly show for them on the CNE Games channel called Bardic Inspiration. And what we do live, and this is another great thing for me because the show's super interactive. That's what the show's about. With my co-host Dylan, we write a song every week on the air. So you are watching us write a song and you're helping us write the song. And every week the song is about a different iconic Dungeons and Dragons personality. So like the first episode was Brunor Battlehammer. We've written one on Strahd von Zarovich. We did the Space Hamster Blues for Minskin Boo, and Jim Zub joined us.
Nice.
Joined us and helped us write the song. So we do that at 1:00 on Tuesdays from 1 to 3. And believe it or not, we get a whole song done in 2 hours. There's only been maybe 2 episodes so far where we didn't finish one, and then Dylan and I finished it later. But yeah, I mean, it's nuts. And then we might be like, we need some help with the lore, and the fans will write in, we'll write a line, or somebody will write a whole line. But that's a great line for the chorus. And so we're writing a song in real time with the audience, and it's super fun. And it's D&D related.
Yeah.
We're going to need a song about Tasha.
It's
and
coming.
The cauldron of really?
I mean, why not?
Yeah.
I love
God.
seeing those type of shows where creativity happens, right? Because, I'm not a huge reality television aficionado, as longtime listeners might know. But the ones that I do like are like the cooking shows or something like that, where you get to see the process of making a piece of art or something like that. And that's what you and Dylan are doing. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, we're cooking up a song.
Yeah.
You are.
In real time and taking input from the audience. That's something I've always been fascinated about, is like, how do you put a song together? I remember reading about like Led Zeppelin, how like the band would just write the song, and then Robert Plant would come in and just do the vocals and writing of the poems or lyrics on his own. And like, so I love everybody's process is different, and it's cool that we get to see you and Dylan work it out in real time.
Yeah. Right. Everyone's process is different. Like the band Rush, that I'm a huge fan of, the drummer would write all the lyrics.
Neil Peart. R.I.P.
So, it's interesting to see everyone's process. When I write with other artists or for other artists with other songwriters, it's interesting. It's like where people sort of honed their craft is how they often will write. So in Nashville, when I write with writers from Nashville, they'll almost always have the title or the chorus first, and then we'll write around that. Like, I've got this great title. I want to write a song with this title. Like, okay, cool. That's our goal. And then we start from there. With others, a lot of guys that started in rock, like me, we'll let the music dictate. We'll come up with a riff or something, and then they'll let that music dictate our mood of what the song should be about. So I often let the chords speak to me on what I think it should be about. But I do it both ways, because then sometimes I'll be like, oh yeah, that's a great name for a song. In fact, the song that I did for True Blood was a song called You Get What You Pay For. And I was sitting around with two other songwriters, and one of them was talking about, I had written down lawyers make good liars, right? Which didn't even end up in the song, right? We were talking about how like lawyers are sometimes professional liars. So lawyers make good liars. And then one of the other songwriters said, yeah, I had my cousin represent me. He's a lawyer, and it kind of wasn't very good. And then somebody said, well, you get what you pay for. And then we go, oh, that's the name of the song. So then we wrote, you get what you pay for. So it's always interesting how those things can happen.
What you're describing sounds very similar to how different D&D groups, come up with ideas and make it a cooperative storytelling. And it's something I've always combined in my head, was like how performance and music performance in particular is very similar to the effect that can happen around a table when everybody's firing and all their imaginations are melding together. I always think of it as a cloud above the gaming table. I don't know why, but I feel like that happens similarly in music venues when there's like this back and forth between the audience and the performers. Everybody's having this shared experience. You can't separate them, and it can only happen, in that specific moment of the live performance or the live D&D game. And what you're describing about coming up with this stuff, I mean, it feels very much like, oh yeah, like this idea came from the wizard who wanted to do this, but then I gave my spin on this, and then it ended up being what happened when we killed that dragon.
Yeah, very true. So, we're like digging down deep to the core of the creative process. It's pretty
cool. What makes us human.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Or tiefling warlocks.
Or That's a callback, people.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, I love that you have this creative outlet, through the streaming shows that you've embraced, and you have this background of, in some ways, all of the things that you've been doing has led up to, being able to do all these streaming shows and performance and stuff like that. So it's really cool to, during these times, be able to have something like that out there.
And you're keeping us all entertained and inspired. So thank you for that.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention this one thing, though, that I've got to mention.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were warned about this, Greg, or not.
I think we may have been.
It has to do with Lizardfolk.
Yes.
Okay. So let's go back to young 8-9-year-old me, and the one of the first minis I ever painted was that classic Raul Partha lizard man holding the shield and the spear. Everybody had that. Lizardfolk always had a special place for me in my heart. So fast forward to where we are today, and you can actually play as a lizard, as a lizard man or woman, and as Lizardfolk. And basically, I want to throw the gauntlet down, and I want to know why Lizardfolk don't have their own language, because in D&D 5e, Lizardfolk speak Draconic. And my argument is that they should have their own language because, yes, dragons are lizards, but lizards are not dragons. So if you want to throw me out of D&D forever for that, that's the hill I'm going to die on, but I will stick to that for the rest of my life.
Okay. So you want us to bring that back to Jeremy Crawford?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We will. Yeah.
And I think Jeremy's going to say, if you want lizard folk to have their own language in your world, make it up. They can do that. You can do anything in Dungeons and Dragons.
I'm not going to accept that answer. I want an official rule change.
What language would they speak? Would they speak the Lizardfolk language?
Yeah, they would speak the Lizardfolk language. I feel that Lizardfolk and Dragonborn or Lizardfolk and dragons should be speaking different languages. That's just me thinking about the background of each of them.
It makes sense to me. And who knows? It could have just been a choice of like, hey, we want to make sure there's a certain number of languages out there and not inundate so that every monstrous race in the monster manual has a different language that you have to learn.
Yeah, and I get that, but I at least still want the official answer as to why.
We'll get to the bottom of this.
We will do that for you.
But I do agree that Jeremy would probably just say, follow your bliss, man. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming by, Jason. It's been a long time coming, and you've done lots of wonderful stuff for Dungeons & Dragons, and you will continue to do it going forward. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. This is super fun, and I look forward to playing D&D for many years to come, and hopefully doing things with you guys for many years to come.
Yes, let's hope
for sure.
So. In person, even.
Oh, yeah. It's going to happen soon. I know it. No, 3 years from now.
Don't say 3.
4.
Stop
it.
Lower.
Stop
it. What's the best way for people to keep track of everything that you're doing and perhaps follow along and watch some of your streaming shows?
I mean, luckily, if you know my name, that's pretty much how you can find me everywhere. I mean, obviously, you can go to jasoncharlesmiller.com and find all the links to the social media sites that you like to follow me on. And of course, if you want to see me live, every Monday at 7 on my Twitch channel, which is Jason Charles Miller.
I'm a big fan of using your own name for all of your social handles. So you are doing Godhead's work.
Thank you. It's only on Twitter that I had to shorten it. So on Twitter, it's Jason C. Miller because my name's too long for Twitter. But if you search for me on Twitter, if you searched Jason Charles Miller on Twitter, you'd find me that way too. So
perfect.
All right.
Awesome.
We'll do that.
Well, you're the best, Jason. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yay.